Sophia was about to give birth in the hospital, to contractions tearing through her body like razor blades, but nothing, absolutely nothing, hurt more than discovering that the attending doctor was him. Her ex-husband, the father of the baby coming into the world, the same man who had abandoned her pregnant and alone months earlier. The fluorescent hospital lights above her seemed to blur and spin as another contraction ripped through her, forcing her to clutch the rails of the bed, her knuckles turning white. Sweat soaked her forehead, her long hair sticking to her face, and she cried out, her voice raw with pain. A nurse rushed to her side, dabbing her face, offering words of comfort, but those words evaporated when the door swung open and he walked in. Daniel. He wore the sterile white coat, the stethoscope draped casually around his neck, gloves on his hands, but nothing could disguise the face that once made her laugh until she cried. The face that had once kissed her every night. The face that had turned cold when she told him she was pregnant. His eyes widened the instant he saw her. For a moment, the world froze, her body writhing on the bed, his posture rigid at the doorway, the sound of machines beeping in a rhythm that seemed to mirror the pounding of her heart. Her lips trembled, a scream not just of labor but of betrayal tearing through her. Her vision blurred with tears, but even through the haze of agony she locked eyes with him, and in her gaze was fire, pain, and disbelief. Months of abandonment slammed back into her chest. The night he walked out on her. The cruel words that echoed in her ears. I can't do this, Sophia. I can't be a father right now. The door slamming shut. The sound of his car fading down the street while she stood there with her hand on her belly, already loving the life he rejected. And now here he was. Her doctor. The man who would deliver the very child he had once told her to get rid of. Sophia screamed, the contraction splitting her in half, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to lunge at him, to curse him, to demand why fate had written such a cruel script, but her body was betraying her with waves of pain. She clenched her jaw and turned her face away, gripping the sheet so hard the fabric nearly tore. Daniel's chest tightened, guilt slamming into him like a freight train. He hadn't been prepared for this. He had walked into the room expecting another delivery, another routine moment of his career. Instead, he came face to face with the ghost of his greatest mistake. His throat went dry, his palms began to sweat inside his gloves, and for the first time in years, he felt like he couldn't breathe. He took a step closer, then stopped, the weight of her gaze burning into him. Sophia's voice cracked, raw and bitter. No, not you. Anyone but you. The nurses exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to step in or wait. The tension was suffocating. Another contraction hit. Sophia arched her back, her body trembling, her scream filling the sterile room. The sound cut Daniel's heart in half. He wanted to run to her, to hold her hand, to whisper strength into her ear, but he had lost that right months ago when he left her standing in the rain, abandoned, betrayed, carrying his child. The monitors beeped louder, the baby's heart rate spiking. The nurse called for calm, urging Sophia to breathe, but her breaths came in short, ragged gasps. Her pain was physical, yes, but her anguish was deeper, heavier, more consuming. Because this wasn't just labor. This was punishment. This was betrayal reborn. Daniel forced himself forward, his hands trembling as he adjusted the monitor. His professional training kicked in, the instinct to save lives, but his emotions battled him at every step. She flinched at his touch, her body recoiling as if his presence was poison. Her eyes shot daggers at him, telling him he wasn't welcome here. Not now, not ever. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to beg her forgiveness, but the words stuck in his throat. What apology could erase nights of loneliness? What words could undo the sight of her belly growing alone while he drowned himself in work and excuses? He swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady, issuing clinical instructions to the nurses, but every syllable trembled with guilt. Sophia's mind spiraled as pain racked her body. Images flashed, her pacing their apartment after he left, whispering promises to the baby inside her. Her walking into the clinic alone for checkups while other women had partners holding their hands. Her crying into her pillow at night, clutching her stomach, whispering prayers that God would never let her child feel unwanted. All of it crashed against her as she looked at him now, the man who had traded their love for fear, their future for ambition. Another contraction hit, and she screamed, the sound echoing through the halls. The nurses urged her to push, but her focus wasn't on them. Her eyes locked onto him again, her voice a broken whisper through the pain. This is your child. The one you didn't want. Look at me now. Daniel froze, his chest heaving, his eyes stinging with tears. He couldn't look away. He couldn't deny it anymore. This was his child. His flesh, his blood, his mistake now crying out for redemption. His hands shook as he leaned closer, guiding the nurses, his voice thick with emotion even as he barked instructions. He was losing control, not of the situation, but of himself. Sophia turned her face away, tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't want his pity. She didn't want his regret. She wanted him to feel every ounce of the pain he had caused. The room was a battlefield now. Machines beeping, nurses rushing, Sophia crying, Daniel fighting against his own guilt. The air was heavy, suffocating, thick with the clash of past and present. And deep down, beneath the pain, beneath the betrayal, one truth pulsed like a heartbeat. She could hate him forever, but at this moment, her life and her child's life were in his hands. The pain tore through Sophia's body like lightning bolts, splitting her in half. Each contraction was sharper, longer, more brutal than the last. Her screams filled the hospital room, bouncing off the sterile white walls. But even louder than the sound of her labor was the storm inside her chest, the storm of rage and betrayal. She could feel his presence. Daniel, her ex-husband, the man she had once trusted with her whole life, the man who had promised forever, now standing at the foot of her bed as if fate itself was mocking her. She tried to block him out, to focus only on the child she was about to bring into the world, but she couldn't escape him. Every time she opened her eyes, she saw him, his jaw tight, his brows furrowed, his gloved hands moving with steady professionalism that clashed with the chaos in her heart. She wanted to scream at him, to shove him out of the room, but her body betrayed her, chained to the contractions that kept coming, one after another, leaving her gasping for air. She clutched the railings of the bed so hard her knuckles turned pale, tears mixing with sweat, her voice breaking into hoarse cries. Daniel gave instructions to the nurses, his voice sharp, controlled, but Sophia caught the cracks in it, the tremor, the guilt hiding beneath his tone. He was fighting to sound like a doctor, but inside he was still the man who had walked away. She saw it in his eyes every time they met hers. Her mind spun back to that night, the night she told him she was pregnant. She could still see the disbelief on his face, the way his eyes had darkened, the silence that stretched between them before he finally spoke those words that cut deeper than any knife. I can't do this, Sophia. I can't be a father right now. She remembered standing there in shock, clutching her belly, whispering that this was their miracle, their child. But he had turned away, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door. And now, here he was, ordering nurses around as if he hadn't shattered her life. The contractions grew worse, ripping her apart. Sophia screamed again, her body arching against the bed, her breath short and ragged. She felt as if she were drowning, pulled under by wave after wave of pain. A nurse grabbed her hand, urging her to push when the time came. But Sophia's voice cracked in fury. Not him. Not him. Get him out. Daniel froze where he stood, the words hitting him harder than any slap. His chest ached, his throat tightening, but he forced himself not to move, not to run. He wanted to leave, to spare her the sight of him, but the monitors screamed with urgency, the baby's heart rate dipping dangerously. The nurse looked at him with wide, desperate eyes, silently pleading for him to step up. For a moment, Daniel's world tilted. The father in him, the doctor in him, and the coward he used to be all collided. His hands shook as he pressed them to the bed rails, leaning closer to Sophia, his voice softer now, breaking through the chaos. He told her to breathe, to focus, to stay strong. Sophia turned her face away, her sobs sharp and bitter. Nothing hurt more than hearing his voice, the same voice that had once whispered love to her, now trying to steady her through the very moment he had abandoned her to face alone. Her body convulsed again, another contraction tearing through her, and she screamed until her throat burned. The baby's heartbeat faltered on the monitor. The nurses shouted updates, their voices rising with panic. Time was running out. Sophia gasped for air, her body trembling violently, her hand clutching her stomach as if she could shield her child from the danger closing in. Daniel's mind raced. He barked orders for more oxygen, for adjustments in position, for immediate preparation for complications. His voice was sharp again, but this time it carried urgency, desperation. He knew what was at stake. He knew this wasn't just any patient, any child. This was his child, the one he had walked away from, the one he thought he had lost forever. And now fate had thrown him into the fire, forcing him to either face his past or let it destroy him. Sophia's cries grew weaker, exhaustion draining her strength. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her lips pale, her body soaked in sweat. She whispered brokenly, her voice raw with anguish. "Why now? Why you? Why my baby?" The words sliced through Daniel, each syllable a dagger. He wanted to answer, to pour out his regret, to tell her how many nights he had cursed himself, how many times he had replayed the moment he left. But there was no time. Lives were on the line. The nurses scrambled around her, the beeping growing faster, sharper, filling the room with dread. Daniel stepped closer, his hands steady now, his eyes locked on Sophia's face. He wasn't just her doctor in this moment. He wasn't just her ex-husband. He was the man responsible for saving the life of the woman he had broken and the child he had abandoned. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, meeting his. For a second, through the haze of agony, she saw something she hadn't seen in months. Fear. Not fear of responsibility this time, but fear of losing her. Fear of losing their child. His lips parted, his voice trembling, but he didn't beg or plead. He simply told her to trust him, just this once. Another contraction ripped through her. She screamed, her body convulsing, her tears blinding her. But deep inside she knew she had no choice. As much as she hated him, as much as she wanted him out of her life forever, she knew that in this moment, her life and her baby's life were in his hands. And that was the cruelest truth of all. Daniel leaned forward, his hands moving with precision, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. He fought not just to deliver a baby, but to atone for the sins that had dragged him into this room. Every instruction, every movement, was fueled not by pride but by desperation, by the aching hope that somehow, saving this child could save a piece of himself too. The room spun with chaos, machines, screams, nurses rushing. But in the middle of it all, two broken souls locked in a war of past and present. One fighting through the fire of betrayal, the other drowning in regret, both tied forever to the child struggling to enter the world. And just as the tension reached its breaking point, the monitor blared louder than ever. The baby's heartbeat dipped dangerously low. Gasps filled the room. Sophia cried out, her strength nearly gone. Daniel's jaw tightened, his eyes burning with a resolve he hadn't felt in years. The monitor's shrill beeping filled the room, each sound like a countdown to disaster. The baby's heart rate had dipped dangerously, flashing numbers on the screen that made the nurse's eyes widen with urgency. The air grew heavy, pressing down on everyone inside the delivery room. Sophia gasped for breath, her chest heaving, her face pale, her body drenched in sweat. Her strength was slipping, her cries turning into hoarse whispers. Every contraction felt like fire ripping through her veins, but nothing burned more than the fear now clawing at her chest. Fear for her baby. Fear that she had carried this life for months only to lose it now, in front of the very man who had once begged her to get rid of it. Daniel's body tensed, his heart slamming against his ribs. His gloved hands hovered for a moment, trembling, before he forced them steady. He had been in delivery rooms countless times before. He had dealt with emergencies, complications, even near deaths. But never like this. Never with the woman he loved and lost. Never with his own child's heartbeat slipping away in front of him. The nurses looked at him, waiting for orders. He barked instructions with urgency. More oxygen, repositioning, prepare for immediate intervention. His voice was sharp, but beneath it ran a current of desperation, like a drowning man clinging to a rope. Sophia turned her head toward him, her eyes filled with tears, pain, and fury. She didn't want to depend on him. She didn't want his touch, his help, his presence. But the truth was brutal. Her life, and the life of her baby, now rested in his hands. The cruel irony crushed her. Months ago, he had rejected this child, and now he was the only one standing between life and death. Another contraction hit, ripping through her body. She screamed, her voice echoing down the sterile hallway. The nurses urged her to push, but her energy was gone, drained by hours of agony and months of heartbreak. Her tears fell in hot streams down her cheeks, her sobs cracking into broken whispers. "Don't let my baby die." Daniel's chest clenched at her words, his vision blurring for a moment. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, his eyes burning. Her baby. That was what she had said. Not their baby. Not his. Just hers. And it was his fault. He had walked away, abandoned her, abandoned their child, and now she didn't even see him as part of this miracle. The thought tore him apart. The monitor blared again, sharper this time. The baby's heartbeat slowed dangerously. A nurse gasped, her voice urgent. "We're losing the baby." Time seemed to freeze. Daniel's heart dropped into his stomach. His body moved before his mind caught up, years of training colliding with raw, personal desperation. He called for immediate intervention, his hands working quickly, expertly, but inside he was unraveling. This wasn't just a patient. This wasn't just a child. This was his child. His flesh, his blood, his chance at redemption. Sweat rolled down his temples as he bent over Sophia, his voice low but urgent, guiding her, begging her to hold on. He pressed his hands where they needed to be, his tone fierce, commanding, as he worked against time itself. The nurses followed every order, their movements quick, precise, but their eyes flicked toward him, sensing the storm raging behind his calm exterior. Sophia, barely conscious, caught fragments of his words. She hated that part of her wanted to listen, to trust him, to believe that maybe he wouldn't let her down again. She squeezed her eyes shut, the memories colliding with the present. The night he left, the months she cried alone, the nights she whispered prayers into the silence. And now this. Him, hovering over her, his voice cracking with urgency as he fought to save the child he had once rejected. The tension snapped into chaos. The baby's heartbeat flatlined for a second, one long, sharp beep that silenced the room. Sophia's body convulsed, her scream tearing out of her throat as terror gripped her. Daniel's heart stopped. He froze for half a second, staring at the monitor, then exploded into action. His hands moved faster, his voice rising above the panic, issuing commands with fire. His body shook, but he refused to let go, refused to lose this battle. He bent the rules, pushed past protocols, risking his reputation, his career, everything, because nothing, absolutely nothing, mattered more than pulling this child back from the edge. The nurses gasped as the monitor flickered. A faint blip, then another. The baby's heartbeat surged back onto the screen, weak but alive. Relief washed through the room in a wave. Some of the staff exhaled loudly, their shoulders sagging, but Daniel didn't stop. He pressed forward, every second focused on ensuring mother and child survived. Sophia's cries grew louder, mixing pain with fragile hope. Her strength flickered back, fueled by the sound of the heartbeat on the monitor. She bore down with every ounce of power left in her, her tears streaming, her voice raw, her spirit burning. And finally, after what felt like an eternity, the air split with the piercing cry of a newborn. The sound shattered the tension like glass. Nurses gasped, some smiling with tears in their eyes. Sophia collapsed back onto the bed, sobbing uncontrollably, her body trembling with exhaustion and relief. The baby's cry was shrill, strong, defiant, echoing through the room like a declaration of life. Daniel's hands shook as he lifted the tiny form, slippery and fragile, into the world. His breath caught, his vision blurred with tears he couldn't control. For the first time in his life, he held his child. The child he had once tried to erase. The child that now existed because Sophia had chosen courage over his cowardice. He stared at the baby, awe and regret flooding him at once. His lips trembled, his heart cracked wide open, and he whispered words no one else heard. "I'm sorry. I'll never fail you again." He turned towards Sophia, the baby cradled gently in his arms. Her eyes, red and swollen from tears, locked onto the child, and fresh sobs tore from her chest. She reached out with trembling arms, and Daniel carefully placed the baby against her. The sight of Sophia cradling their child, the child she had fought to protect alone, broke him completely. He fell to his knees beside the bed, his tears spilling freely now, his body shaking with sobs. He pressed his forehead to the edge of the mattress, unable to speak, unable to lift his head. In that moment, he wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a man in control. He was a broken father, desperate for a chance to make things right. Sophia glanced at him, her heart warring inside her. Rage still burned in her veins, but so did gratitude. She hated him for the pain he had caused, but she couldn't deny the truth staring her in the face. He had saved their baby. He had fought for them, risked everything, and brought their child safely into the world. The room grew quiet again, the baby's soft cries filling the silence. Nurses slipped out, giving them space, leaving only the three of them in the room: the broken mother, the shattered father, and the miracle that bound them together. The room was heavy with silence except for the fragile cries of new life. Sophia cradled the baby against her chest, tears dripping freely down her cheeks, her heart racing with emotions too tangled to name. Relief flooded her. Her child was alive, breathing, safe, but the weight of everything else pressed down harder than ever. The irony burned her. The man who had abandoned her when she needed him most was the same man who had just delivered their baby into the world. Daniel knelt beside the bed, his forehead pressed to the edge of the mattress, his body trembling with sobs. His hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white, his tears staining the floor. For months, he had drowned himself in guilt, trying to bury the truth of what he had done. But nothing compared to this moment, seeing the miracle he almost lost forever. He lifted his head slowly, his face streaked with tears, his eyes swollen and red. He looked not at Sophia, not at the past, but at the tiny child nestled against her. His lips trembled, his voice raw. Sophia turned her gaze toward him, her eyes sharp despite her exhaustion. Her arms tightened protectively around the baby. Every fiber of her wanted to scream at him, to remind him of the nights she wept alone, the doctor appointments she faced without him, the cruel sting of his words when he walked out. She wanted to tell him this child survived not because of him, but in spite of him. But another part of her, smaller, quieter, saw the truth in his face. He was broken. Completely, utterly broken. The silence stretched until Daniel finally spoke, his voice low, shaking, but filled with naked honesty. He told her he was sorry. Not the shallow apologies of the past, but raw words dripping with regret. He admitted his fear, how he had let ambition blind him, how he had convinced himself he wasn't ready to be a father. He confessed how every night since he left, he had been haunted by the thought of her carrying their child alone, haunted by the sound of the door slamming in his memory. He admitted that seeing her in that room tonight nearly killed him, because he realized she had been stronger than he ever was. Sophia's tears fell harder, but her face stayed hard. She listened, her heart torn in two. She wanted to believe him, but scars don't vanish with words. She thought of every prayer she had whispered, asking God for strength to raise this child without him. She thought of the groceries she carried home alone, the nights she lay awake feeling the baby kick inside her while her pillow soaked with tears. She thought of how many times she told herself she didn't need him. And yet, here he was, on his knees, begging, not for her love, not even for her forgiveness, but for the chance to be in his child's life. His voice cracked as he told her he didn't deserve her, that he might never earn her trust back, but he would do anything, to prove he could be a father. He begged her not to shut him out, not to punish their baby for his sins. His hands shook as he pressed them to his face, his sobs raw, guttural, echoing off the hospital walls. The baby stirred in Sophia's arms, letting out a soft cry. She rocked gently, her lips quivering, her heart aching. She looked at her child, the miracle she had carried through storm and fire. This child was her strength, her reason, her light in the darkest nights. And whether she wanted to admit it or not, this child was also his. She glanced back at Daniel, broken and kneeling, and for the first time, her voice softened. She told him the truth. That forgiveness wouldn't come easily. That trust had to be rebuilt, not promised. That the pain he had caused would never vanish overnight. Her words were firm, her tone steady, but there was no venom in them, only truth. She said she didn't know yet if she could ever love him again, but she wouldn't deny their child the chance to know their father, if he proved himself worthy. Daniel's head shot up, his eyes wide, hope sparking through the tears. He swore he would prove it. He swore he would spend every day of his life showing not with words, but with actions that he was no longer the man who walked away. His chest heaved as he promised he would never again let fear dictate his choices. Sophia studied him, her heart torn, her body trembling with exhaustion. She didn't smile. She didn't forgive. But she allowed him to rise to his feet and step closer. He reached out slowly, carefully, his hands shaking as he touched the baby's tiny fingers. The child's hand curled instinctively around his, and Daniel's knees nearly buckled at the feeling. His lips trembled, his eyes flooded again, as he whispered promises under his breath, vows only the child would ever hear. Sophia watched, her heart breaking all over again. But this time it wasn't from betrayal. It was from the fragile glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, redemption was possible. She leaned back against the pillows, her body drained, her spirit raw. She didn't know what the future held. But in this moment, with the baby's cries softening, with Daniel's tears falling freely, she knew one thing for sure. The story wasn't over. The door cracked open and her mother peeked in, her eyes widening at the sight before her. She saw her daughter holding the baby, her ex-son-in-law at her side, their hands touching over the fragile new life between them. She whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, stepping back to give them space. Outside the hospital window, dawn began to break. The sky glowed with streaks of orange and pink, as if even the heavens were marking this new beginning. The night of pain, of reckoning, had given way to morning. A baby's cry had shifted everything. Daniel leaned down, his lips brushing the baby's forehead. His tears fell onto the tiny skin, baptizing the child not in water, but in remorse and promise. He looked at Sophia, his voice breaking as he thanked her, not for forgiving him, not for giving him another chance, but for choosing life when he had chosen fear. Sophia closed her eyes, her tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She didn't answer him. She didn't need to. The baby's steady breathing against her chest was answer enough. And that's how it happened. A night of betrayal turned into a night of miracles. The man who once abandoned her was forced to face his greatest failure, and in the same room where she almost lost everything, he found the chance to begin again. But I want to know, if this were you, would you forgive him, or would you raise the child alone? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Don't leave without smashing that subscribe button, turning on the bell, and sharing this story, because the next one will shake you even harder, and trust me, you do not want to miss it.